boy Cal. It's Darryl. And we're on our way to see the world's most dangerous man and
the Beast.
Dan Severn, Ken Shamrock, Jimmy's World Order.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell that is. Hey, this is the Road Wild podcast. We haven't done this in about, 2 years.
Yeah, it's like 2-3 years.
The pandemic put this whole thing on pause, so we finally are getting back together, Darryl and I. We're on the road, so if the audio sounds a little off, we apologize in advance. But we are here to talk a little wrestling and talk a little Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn.
Actually, because I messaged you about this, I wanted to do something a little different. Because normally when we're in here, we talk about modern day wrestling and stuff like that. There's a million podcasts you can do that with, especially the Alliance guys.
Thanks for the plug.
No problem. But like I said, I'm a fan of podcasts where they talk about past things that have happened in the past, things where the story has already been told from beginning to end. So now you can reflect back on it and read all the news and see how everything worked out. None of this, well, let's see how it plays out, or everybody predicting what's going to happen or saying what they feel like in the moment. The podcast where you know what happened and you get little tidbits that you didn't know back then. And now you see it, through different set of eyes. So I also wanted to make this a little more personal, because you don't really get that elsewhere. And one story that I've never heard, but I'm very intrigued with, is with you, Jay, and how you became a fan of the National Wrestling Alliance, because from what I remember, you caught them during a period where they were not at their peak, like they were in the 80s and in some areas of the 90s, and the TNA run, as far as like a national television exposure and all that. You caught them during a period where it wasn't as big as it once was. So that's where my curiosity is how did you discover the actual National Wrestling Alliance and became the aficionado, or I don't want to say unofficial spokesman, but for the longest time it seemed like you were the main guy that was putting their information out there when nobody else would even cover it if they could find it.
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. It's something that I don't think I've ever told the full story, but I'm sure longtime listeners have heard bits and pieces, so we'll put it all out there right now. And it was shortly around the advent of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Yeah, this guy, Dan the Beast Severn, who at the time myself was a bit of a high school wrestler, and I thought that maybe one day I might be a pro wrestler, which no, that didn't happen. But I was very intrigued by this Ultimate Fighting Championship because it was mixing martial arts, hence the MMA. And what you would get with these fights, early MMA, early UFC was more akin to street fighting than it is the sport it is today. Mm-hmm. And so when a guy like Dan the Beast Severn showed up, he got in the ring, and he wasn't like boxing and he wasn't like kickboxing. He was literally throwing people with Greco-Roman suplexes and power bombs. I saw him power bomb a guy once in the middle of a match, and it just blew my mind. You had Dan the Beast Severn literally just like rolling fools in the octagon, and then on one particular night he shows up and he's got an entourage holding belts. It's got the UFC 5 championship, the Super Fight championship, and then what did I see? The 10 pounds of gold, a title that to me was synonymous with wrestling in the 80s. Now, I'm a kid that grew up watching any wrestling I could. Being on the West Coast, WWE was more prevalent. but the NWA was on TBS, so we'd watch the NWA when it was available. And I grew up watching Sting and the Horsemen, Flair specifically, the Road Warriors. My parents even bought my brother and I those AWA Remco figures.
Wow.
And even and the odd thing about the AWA Remco figures is that their belt was more in line with the 10 pounds of gold than it was with the AWA championship. So I had this affinity for this title belt without even really understanding why. And the more I saw this title belt, the more I just wanted to get more invested. Like that 10 pounds of gold was always the sexier looking belt compared to Hulk Hogan's world title, that green belt with looked like it was made at a trophy store.
Yeah.
So when I see Dan Severn walk into the octagon, strolling in, with 3 title belts and one of them being the 10 pounds of gold, it grabbed my attention. Because up until that moment, like many other people, I just thought WCW was the NWA. I just thought it was a natural progression of the NWA buying WCW, just becoming the NWA, just a brand change. I didn't know there were separate entities involved.
Like TNA going into Impact for modern day people.
Right, exactly. So then now my interest is peaked, and the internet is in its infancy.
I can understand that, because I remember watching when Dan Severn came out on Raw, and Jim Cornette was holding up all his UFC titles. So right. I can get that image that you would have. And then
that would happen slower later in the story. Mm-hmm. But so I saw Severn with that belt, and I just was enamored. And again, the internet was in its infancy. Most people back then didn't even have the real internet. We were using AOL, so you'd go to AOL Grandstands, which was like a forum. You would go to the WWF page on AOL. So there was a lot of stuff we would do to try to find this stuff out back then, and it wasn't readily available. So, long story short, I'm trying to find out more about Dan Severn as champion. Of course, like I said, there wasn't a lot out there. And then, fast forward a couple years, we get Dan Severn appearing on Raw with that title as part of this NWA Invasion angle. And I know a lot of people thought it was hokey. I thought it was fun. We've talked about it on this podcast before, that it was kind of corny, Cornette-ish. But it was also it was kind of like what Cornette was saying at the time wasn't far from the truth. I mean, the WWE was kind of becoming garbage, and you had WCW, who was getting hot with the whole NWO, but WCW kept trying to tie their claims to still the NWA title and the history and the lineage of the 10 pounds of gold, which that's just not true. That wasn't the case. So when the WWE brought in the NWA, they were kind of saying, hey, your claims to that 10 pounds of gold are false, because here it is. Now, we never got any title defenses on WWE programming, but looking back now, it's kind of interesting to see how Dan Severn was literally working indies every other weekend in between his dates for the WWE. He was flying to Japan and then coming back and wrestling, on Raw. So it was kind of cool, and that's what kind of piqued my interest. But like I said, back then the internet was in its infancy, and you didn't really get a lot of real hard facts. And fast forward a few more years, and my local independent wrestling promotion that was connected to the WWE was UPW. UPW was the home of Frankie Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, John Cena, of course, Samoa Joe. A lot of great talent from UPW went on to go in the WWE. Guys like Horseshoe, Luther Reigns, John Heidenreich, who would end up teaming with Animal as LOD 2000.
And real quick, John Ian, R.I.P., bro.
Yeah. Ryan Sakota, R.I.P. There's a lot of those. We start talking about it. And then, sure enough, UPW started a relationship with 01. 01 had a relationship with the NWA through Steve Corino, who was the world champion. Then Hashimoto won the belt, and now I'm in. Now the internet is at a point where you can research stuff, and I learned about Steve Corino because I knew of him from ECW, and he was out there making the world title seem relevant again. And he's out there wrestling in Japan against Shinya Hashimoto, who wasn't far removed from his IWGP championship reign. So it felt very, very important. And then when Hashimoto won the belt here in the United States, you know, he came to Southern California with that title. And he literally came to UPW with that belt. Yeah, there's Frankensons. And he came there with that belt and started throwing down challenges. And like Samoa Joe was there. Oh God, what was his name? Tom. I can't think of his name right now. Anyways, a couple people were there to challenge for the NWA World Title. Of course, Severin would end up winning that title back before the transition to Impact. So knowing that Steve Corino run in early 2000s, combined with the fact that Hashimoto had the belts and UPW, and these were all promotions that I was following and was paying attention to, instantly had a fan in me. So the long story short, them making Dan Severn the NWA World Champion got Cal to start following the National Wrestling Alliance. And
it was when you started to see it in person with UPW, that's what like hooked you?
Yeah, well, I mean, so like that belt, again, that belt literally is the biggest star of the NWA. Anyone who wants to change that title belt, I think, just doesn't get wrestling, doesn't get branding. And yeah, just seeing that belt. And it wasn't just in UPW, but it was also like watching, not watching, but reading, looking at photos with Steve Corino as champion, with the title being represented in Japan under 01, and following that dynamic of 01 becoming a part of the NWA. They even had NWA International Tag Team titles that were established for 01 that UPW guys were wrestling for. The UPW guys, along with 01, were wrestling for an international NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. And I mean, those were guys like Rocky Romero, Ricky Reyes, TJ Perkins, Brian Kendrick, who actually ended up winning the title. It was just, you know, a weird time, a wild time, and some of these guys who had watched on the indies were now going to Japan and competing for NWA titles. All that just was so cool to me that I bought in. I was hooked. And again, that was early 2000, 2001, 2000.
But it was definitely the live experience that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Seeing that relationship right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
Right there, and down, I don't know, first, second, third row, wherever you were. Seeing that, and especially on a regular occasion.
Well, you've been to the Galaxy Theater. It wasn't, back then, it wasn't like a regular thing. It was a one-time deal, but the fact that there was so much potential, it was unrealized because everything happened with Impact and everything else, but there just felt like there was so much potential for something really big to happen. And I was sitting there hoping that Samoa Joe would get a crack at it, because Samoa Joe versus Hashimoto would have been a dream bout for even
today's standards.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been awesome today, but it would have been amazing back then too. But yeah, that's kind of my story about how I became a fan of the NWA. Let me ask you now the same question. How did you become a fan of the NWA?
You're laughing now because I already gave you a preview. Okay. Growing up, especially out here on the West Coast, all I knew was WWF. That's all I knew. Saturday, Sunday afternoon, 12 o'clock, Fox 11.
Yep.
Right after that came Batman. So that's all I knew.
You never turned to Channel 13 to watch the Glow Girls afterwards?
No, I don't. I probably Men in Black that out. And I got the neuralizer now to do it.
Yep.
And so anyways, that's all I knew was WWF ever since 1988. And like I said, I think the first show I remember watching was the main event, Hogan and Andre. So big wrestling fanatic, especially, you know, my dad and my late Uncle Darryl, who I'm named after. Big wrestling fans. My Uncle Darryl got the pay-per-views like once a year. My dad got me WWF magazine subscriptions and all that. And especially back in the day, I mean, kids these days, go watch Captain Marvel. And you see her fall through a Blockbuster video. That's where we were at every weekend. That was our Netflix.
Yep.
So every weekend, I'd be at the Blockbuster, and thankfully it was within walking distance. So if I wasn't renting a game, I was renting a wrestling tape. However, I always got the WWF tapes, but I remember seeing some tapes in that section with some wrestlers that I don't know, wasn't familiar with, but it was in the wrestling section. But it said NWA. Keep in mind that the only NWA I'm familiar with at this time was the rap group that my dad did not want me listening to because he did not approve the lyrics for my age. So I knew better than I'm not touching that because I don't want to get in trouble.
Can I give you a quick story real quick, not to interrupt? But
is this the Marquez story?
No.
Okay.
My brother, who was 6 years older than me, was a huge NWA fan. So by proxy, I was a huge NWA fan. So here you had little white boy J. Cal walking in the safe neighborhoods of Lakewood, rapping about "We Want Easy," you know, dope man. And yeah, I did know the lyrics. I still know most of them too. So core memory. But go ahead. Sorry.
Hey, I have an older half sister. Same deal. So I never touched them. And then one Christmas, my half sister, she got me some trading cards, but they were WCW trading cards.
Oh, I think I know the ones. Were they the black ones with the yellow stars around them?
There was that, and it was also the ones that came out like the year after, where they were like, they tried to look like 90s with like well, it's hard to describe, but look it up on the internet, you can find it. But yeah, it was WCW trading cards. I didn't know what WCW was, because keep in mind, we didn't have cable. So I was like, okay, you know, but I went ahead and just put them in. But some of the faces on there I did recognize from them being in WWF, either formerly there or currently there.
We're talking early 90s?
Like, yeah.
So like Junkyard Dog?
I don't remember specifically.
Okay.
But I did remember seeing these guys, like, at one point or another. I'm like, okay. And then, fast forward, when we finally got cable, one Saturday afternoon, I'm flipping through channels, and I catch this wrestling. And I don't know why I remember this, but I remember the specific clip was from the Great American Bash '91. I found that out later, where it was Luger and Wyndham in the cage, and the clip was Harley Race and Mr. Hughes walking out, throwing the chair in. Or, not, he didn't throw the chair, that was Dylan. Walking to the ring and talking to Luger, and then Luger like hit the pile driver and won the championship. So I caught my first glimpse of what was the NWA, but not WCW, was right after Flair left.
Right.
So that's when I caught that. But again, I'm young and I don't know a damn thing about time zones. So when they were saying 6:05, I tuned into that channel,
yeah.
6:05 Pacific time, and I'm getting like a Braves game or something. And I'm like, where's the wrestling? And it wasn't until my dad started getting the newspaper delivered that the Sundays had their own TV guide. They had their own TV book. And looking through there, I'm like, okay, so the wrestling starts at 3. And so then I started watching WCW, but that was like later 91. If I ever caught WCW, it was flipping through the channels. I remember one time I'm at my uncle's house and I'm flipping through channels, and I caught like the end of a Clash of Champions. I don't remember which one. Anyways, fast forward, so I still only know WWF and WCW. It wasn't until 92 where they had that Clash of Champions with the NWA tag title tournament.
Oh, that was a good one.
When they had that, that's when I discovered the National Wrestling Alliance.
Did you know that Benoit was in that tournament?
Oh, dude, that Benoit and Wellington, Liger and Pillman,
which was an odd pairing.
Well, former opponents, now partners, but
yeah,
that was one of those rare matches where you made a first impression, and hey, this was before everything happened with him, but I was like, whoa, who is this Benoit guy?
Yeah.
I want to see more of him, which he eventually did years later, sporadically. But yeah, that guy impressed me though. The first night, that was the one thing outside of the Steiners and Williams and Gordy that I took away from that show.
There was sorry to interrupt again, but in 90, what was it, 94, 95, 94, when they were going to crown the new NWA World Champion, Dennis Coralluzzo wasn't a big fan of Shane Douglas. In fact, he had buried Shane Douglas on a fairly often regular basis. And that's part of the reason why everything happened with ECW and the NWA. But the guy that Coralluzzo wanted to be world champion was Benoit. And had he had his way, Benoit would have won the world title. And probably we wouldn't have had that moment of the title being thrown down, because at that moment, it was still indies where, Shane Douglas had a lot to benefit from him tossing down the NWA world title, where, somebody like Benoit wouldn't have had the same reaction. It wouldn't have meant the same, so he probably wouldn't have done it. So, just a little interesting what if right there.
So, that was my introduction to the National Wrestling Alliance, and then later on, I still didn't get it. So, later on, then I see the clips of which I later found out was the G1, with Chono winning the NWA title, and I recognized that belt because I remember Ric Flair had it, and Ric Flair had that belt on my trading cards, and now I see it here. And I remember Flair taking it to the WWF, so that sparked my curiosity. Like, wait a minute, I reckon, okay, what's the deal here? What's the story here? And again, I only had WWF magazine. I didn't buy the Pro Wrestling Illustrateds or the Aftermax or nothing like that. I was strictly WWF. So seeing that and knowing it's the National Wrestling Alliance and not the guys with attitude, I finally one weekend got a different VHS tape, which was Wrestle War 90 Wild Thing, because I recognized Flair on the cover and Luger on the cover. So I got that, and that's where I'm seeing, which unfortunately that tapes were edited back then.
Big time.
Yeah, so I was seeing some familiar names. I'm like, okay, cool. And then that's when I started renting more of the NWA tapes, which that's where I saw the War Games from the Bash in '87. That's where I fell in love with 1989 NWA, based off what I saw at the Great American Bash, what I saw at Halloween Havoc. Starrcade '89 is still my favorite Starrcade to this day. And I liked it, but again, I wasn't. This is 94, 95-ish. Where I only knew the NWA from its association from WCW Modern Day. When that broke off, I didn't follow it, know anything about it. I just thought like, okay, they just disappeared or whatever it was. I still did not understand the dual association.
Yeah.
And which is funny considering how today in WWF there's 2 world champions.
Yep.
But I couldn't get it back then when in WCW there's 2 world champions. So anyways, fast forward, I see the NWA again on Raw. But still, I didn't get what was going on outside of, oh, this is the real NWA. This is, like the WCW slap that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And then when that went away again, I didn't follow until I see it again with TNA and the run that they had there, which then I was a lot more knowledgeable, internet and everything.
Sure.
So then I was more knowledgeable. But once that broke off, again, I didn't follow. And till a mutual friend of me and Marquez invited me to the first taping at the Galaxy Theater for the relaunched Hollywood, because I didn't go to the previous ones. Because I didn't know anything about the independents back then.
Well, that was one of the bigger shows too. Like the other stuff before, yeah, it was important, but this is what really kicked off Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and what really the other 2 tapings, after about 7 episodes, they were done. We're still talking about Hollywood today.
Still active today.
Still active, yeah.
So, and then, Adam Pearce as the champion. Woo. He really caught my attention, and because he was different than what I was seeing on TV, an old Eric Bischoff quote, don't try to be better than or worse than, be different than.
Yeah.
And Adam as a champion hooked me. Colt Cabana, again, I didn't follow the indies. I didn't know anything about Ring of Honor before they started getting their weekly show on Sinclair. So I didn't know much about Colt, but I liked what I saw.
So you never saw them on HD Network, the Ring of Honor show on HD?
No, because that was like what you had third, I don't want to say third string, but it wasn't your basic cable plan.
Gotcha.
You had to upgrade your cable plan to get that channel.
Gotcha.
And there was nothing worth upgrading for me to get that plan.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So, no. And it was through that, and hey, weekly show, a monthly show, me and the guys can get together and then go watch live wrestling right in front of us that really doesn't cost much of anything. If it,
we should bring Chuck on here one of these days to talk about his ass whooping he got from Colt Cabana, pre-NWA World Champion.
Dave's got that footage somewhere locked in a vault.
I'm sure he can't show it. We had a friend. We still have a friend. He hasn't gone anywhere. His name's Chuck. Chuck, if you're listening, we love you, buddy. Chuck really liked to play up to Adam Pearce because he was a new fan of what Dave was doing.
Actually, I got to cut you off there. What happens is that Chuck gets easily caught up in stuff.
Sure.
He gets easily caught up, and he doesn't know any better. So when you get a bunch of rebellious people booing Colt Cabana, and because they want to be, they want to try to take over the show or whatnot, and Chuck doesn't know any better, and he gets in on it, and then Colt gets upset, which you never hear of. Colt gets upset, and that's when he challenges somebody, and again, he doesn't know any better, so he goes out and gets in the ring, and then he gets slapped and beat up.
Or not first in line.
And you know what happens next. Don't ever get in the ring. So, but anyways, through Championship Wrestling through Hollywood, that was how, you know, I became a regular follower at that time of the NWA. Unfortunately, when everything happened and the association was lost, again, and the end of the 7 Levels of Hate, I really didn't follow the National Wrestling Alliance more than I stuck with my allegiance to Dave and him trying to set up the United Wrestling. So, really the only NWA I kept up with was whenever me and you had a conversation and you would update me on this or that or this or that, or I would hear something.
Yeah.
You know, but past that up until the whole Billy Corgan era that we're in now, that's pretty much my story of how I discovered it. But I avoided it for the longest time because I thought it was the rap group or it was associated with the rap group that at my age I wasn't going to take the chance of getting in trouble or having anything happen to me. You know,
you just weren't permitted to.
Yeah, I was not permitted to listen to it on my own. And if I brought home a tape that says NWA, you know, then my dad, who, you know, he only knows WWF, so he's going to be like, what the hell is this? Because at that time, that was the NWA. And to quickly wrap this up, what reminded me of this story was a Facebook post that Dave put where he talked about he like drove past Ice Cube somewhere or something, and he mentioned like, oh well, he tried to sue us over the NWA name, but he lost because their National Wrestling Alliance was in existence long before Eazy-E came along. So, and just hearing that story is like, oh God, okay, so it wasn't just me.
Well, you know, and the funny thing about that, think about this, right? Because in the society today, it's very litigious. There's lawsuits over spilled coffee, you know, and so much stuff happens. And back then, you know, Jim Crockett Promotions, Don Owens, the Sportatorium, you know, the Von Erichs, you know, all these connections to the NWA, and not one person had a problem with the rap group using those 3 initials. If they did, we never heard about it. But on the flip side to that, Ice Cube, when the NWA has a resurgence, Ice Cube wants to sue the brand because he feels like it's knocking them off. That brand's been around since 1948. Like, come on, man.
Well, it's funny how these things happen. I mean, there's a tag team called Public Enemy who are, you know, basically the white boy hip hop crew, and then there's the rap group Public Enemy, and I've never heard of anything crossing between those two.
No. And
they existed in the same universe. It's funny how these things happen.
Well, and I mean, this is a topic for another discussion, and I'm sure, you know, I'm not the guy to have it, but, you know, a lot of the hip-hop community was influenced by the swag and bravado of the nature boy Ric Flair. And he gets a pass from a lot of these guys because of who he is and what he did. And, like, he's even been in rap videos, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's too many to name, but yeah, it's especially, you know, there's that old phrase where you're more famous when you're dead than when you're alive. It was when Ric Flair's wrestling career finally died that he became more famous and more of a crossover celebrity, especially because he was living the lifestyle that these rappers were rapping about. Like he was living that lifestyle.
I heard Snoop Dogg once say, like, we all wanted to be Ric Flair. The limousine driving, kiss stealing son of a gun.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have it memorized, but I know Snoop Dogg in this interview, I don't remember where it was with, but he had said, like, put over Flair big time. Like, he's who we all wanted to grow up to be, with the Rolex watches and the $500 shoes and the, Tony Schiavone, this sport coat costs more than you make in a year, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Flair was iced out before the word ice or bling bling was a thing. He was doing it. That's how it is. I mean, Flair, yeah. Flair was the model.
Speaking of Flair, before we go to our first commercial break, speaking of Flair, do you think he's gonna get canceled? Like, I know they're trying. The online community's trying to cancel Ric Flair, but I still see him pop up in these Car Shield commercials, and I don't see him going away.
Well, they put a pause on the Car Shield commercials, but no. I mean, it's gonna be. I mean, that's another, like I said, story in itself. But just sticking to Rick, no, I don't think Rick's gonna be canceled. I mean, it's fresh. It's a fresh wound.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it just happened. Everybody, for PR, stuff, they have to keep their distance so they don't get the dirt on them right now for that dark side of the ring. But I think it's something that's just eventually it's going to blow over. And it's going to be, especially with the way the internet is these days and everything, people get mad about everything. Are we still supposed to be mad that Selena Vega didn't wrestle on the 9/11 SmackDown? Are we still supposed to be mad about that?
Yeah.
No, everybody moved on after a week, and so did she. And hell, right now she's getting the biggest push of her career.
Yeah,
so,
true.
I mean, there's just a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. A lot of people quick to do cancel culture and whatnot. But no, I don't think Rick's going to be canceled. Rick, at this stage, I don't want to say he's Teflon, but he's going to lay low right now until, because it's still a fresh wound. And over time, he'll be back like nothing happened. I mean, come on, Hulk Hogan said the N-word on tape, and he took his lickings, had to, do a couple of things. Some people still won't forgive him. That's it. That's their right. But he's back in the fold.
I know Tommy Dreamer lost his job at Impact over what was said on that dark side of the ring.
Yeah, it was definitely insensitive for how it was put together, because again, we have not seen the raw footage, the raw interview from start to finish, with no cuts, no dramatic music added to the background, or it cut to make the story a certain way, because certain talents have spoke out about their interviews where it's like the clip that they used was not in reference to what was said or the subject at hand or that specific thing that was talked about, but that's journalism.
Yeah.
So, but it came off very bad. It came off very insensitive. So again, Dreamer right now, he has to, take his lickings or whatnot, but I still saw Tommy Dreamer on a clip wrestling over the weekend. So he's still gonna get his bookings.
Yeah.
He's still gonna, be able to make his career. It's just, it's not gonna be with, a corporate company or nationally, television company like Impact, but Dreamer, no, it'll blow over for Dreamer too.
And the wild thing about that is like Tommy Dreamer didn't do anything on the plane. Like, he was commenting on it, and that's what cost him his job. And then this other thing about that too is, who would even consider being on the dark side of the ring? I know I have friends who were requested to be on the show and declined because they didn't want their words twisted. And this was even before the Tommy Dreamer and Ric Flair comments and all that. So it's like, it's wild to me. Like, I don't know how that show has a season 3 or season 4 or whatever, because at some point, like, it's going to be a toxic thing to be on. You can't trust what you say is going to be treated with a validity, and who knows what kind of editing is going on behind the scenes.
Well, also being in the wrestling business for so long, you got to be smart enough to know what to say and how to say it. Because like I said, the way it came off with Dreamer, it came off like just really bad, and it just made me go like, you're being recorded. Why would you say anything the way you worded it and in the tone that you used? You got to be, if you're gonna, if you're gonna be, especially as long as he's been, how many interviews he's done. Dreamer has his own freaking podcast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he has more than one. He was on Busted Open. I mean, he's back there now.
Yeah.
But, he was on Busted Open where he does interviews and stuff, and he sees how these people act. I mean, we can talk about Tony Khan and how he acts, and that's another story. But he should have been smarter with the way he chose his words and the way he said it and the tone and the subject and whatnot. That I will fault him for. But it's just, and also there's just some people in the business where it's like, they got nothing to lose. I mean, are we going to cancel, if Earl Hebner says something insensitive, are we going to cancel Earl Hebner? He's out of the business.
Yeah.
What does he have to lose? Mike Chioda. Last I checked, Chioda's out of the business. What does he have to lose?
Yeah.
I mean, you still have people that can openly talk about things. I mean, are we going to cancel Medusa? I mean, for, talking about the mental issues of Luna Vachon? I mean, no. It depends.
I want to cancel Medusa for the dumb joke she made at Empower pay-per-view, where she said, hey, how about we change the name to the New Women's Alliance? That's enough right there for me to cancel Medusa. You're gone. Throw her in the trash can, damn it. All right, we'll be back. So we just introduced ourselves to two former NWA World Champions, and Dan the Beast Severn and the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. And I'm telling you right now, Shamrock could still go. I think he could whip your ass. He definitely whip my ass. I think he'd whip your ass too.
Well, as we were talking off air, because we had to wait 2 hours in line, Shamrock did have a little brief return for Impact just last year, where Moose called him out, and that just resulted in him having his little mini run. That resulted in him going in the Impact Hall of Fame with The Rock, sending in a video to induct him and everything. And another thing that we were talking about in line was how, especially with wrestlers that have, basically gotten up there in age, the bump card, so to speak, to steal one from Adam Pearce, the bump card is full, but how can they still be able to go? And, like I was saying, it has to be the right person that suits their style, complements their style, and, would give them what they needed to play to their strengths, so to speak. And one example I mentioned very recently was at the G1 finals in New Japan, Katsuyori Shibata, who has not wrestled in 3 to 4 years. I don't know the exact amount. 3 to 4 years because of his match with Okada that, did a lot of damage to his head and that he went out with Zack Sabre Jr. and had the 5-minute exhibition match, which was basically, like a 5-minute grappling match. There was no punches to the face or nothing like that. It was just straight rolling, straight grappling, submission style and everything. Like you would see like in a grappling tournament or an amateur wrestling tournament or something like that. It was that type of style between the two men, and it was only 5 minutes, so you weren't going to get burned out
or blown up.
Yeah, so it was, and it was a good showcase, especially, to have that moment to see Shibata in there doing something where you're just seeing him in the ring again and coming back after everything he's been through. And, you saw that briefly with Shamrock and Impact, where they didn't put him in the ring with guys that it would be a styles clash. He wasn't in there with the stereotypical X Division guy that was going to be doing, all the high flying, all the flips, and, high fast speed. They put him in there with people and in situations that would complement him. Like they had him in there with Sami Callihan. You know, one segment of that, especially during the pandemic era, was cinematic. And there was they were in the ring and whatnot, but Sami Callihan is not somebody that's going to be doing a bunch of off-the-wall stuff that takes Shamrock out of his element. He's going to be in the ring, they're going to wrestle, they're going to brawl, they're going to everything that Shamrock can keep control of, so to speak. That was just one example. And just like Moose is an athletic big man that, I don't want to compare it to Vader, but similar backgrounds with, Moose being the football player and all that, and Moose has athletic ability, just not the weight that Vader had, but definitely the same type of stereotype.
It's funny you bring up Vader, because I tweeted it the other day, and I think you saw it too.
Yeah, I responded to it.
And could Vader get over in today's climate? And people thought that I was shitting on Vader, which couldn't be further from the truth, because I'm a huge Vader fan. I'm a huge fan of that style of wrestling. But, we are in a softer world today than we were 20 years ago, when Vader was bouncing back and forth between Japan, Germany, and the United States, holding the Catch Wrestling Alliance World Title, the WCW World Title, or the IWGP title. So, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there, but just you said Vader, and I had to go off on a tangent there. I think Vader's great. I'd wish there was another Vader, a modern day Vader. We just don't have anyone like that right now.
We have a bunch of possibilities, a bunch of guys with that potential. It's not. Like I responded to you, yeah, Vader will get over today, but he will not be booked as strong. He will not be booked in the way that Vader was, where he was just a dominant figure. I don't see anybody in wrestling, well, especially in the States, that's going to get booked to come in like how Vader did with Inoki, where Vader came in and just squashed Inoki.
What about Walter in WWE NXT? I mean, he might be the closest thing.
Well, NXT UK, I guess you can point that out, but again, that's so under the radar.
Yeah.
But all it takes for me to see is Walter's one appearance on the WWE main roster at Survivor Series, and he was the first guy gone in 5 minutes. That just popped any hope, dreams, aspirations of him on that main roster. Him and the technically it's NXT 3.0, but who's counting? The new NXT, I don't see a place for him with just the way that they have things are right now, which is another story in itself, but I'm not going off on that rant. And the Triple H NXT, he definitely, I think would have been the closest person to get there, but he pretty much made it clear he wasn't interested in moving down to the States full time.
Yeah.
So they made him the anchor of that UK brand, which again is so under the radar.
Well, let's get back to what you were saying, though, and I'm sorry, that's my fault. I derailed the combo there, but let's get back to how Shamrock was handled in his last run at Impact, where you were talking about how they were pacing opponents that played up to Shamrock's abilities.
Yeah, like him, and I've said it numerous times on Twitter, but I don't have the big following, which I kind of like, so I can just say what I want in peace. Eddie Edwards in Impact is the modern day Bret Hart. He's the guy that can work with anybody. He's the guy, especially when working with bigger guys, gives them their best match possible that they can have. And, just the heart and soul of the company. He's the one go-to guy you can always depend on for years now. And they had a little thing with him and Eddie Edwards once he joined forces with Callahan, and Eddie was able to work with him, and Impact did right for him. If that was his final run, so to speak, Impact did right by him. Impact gave him the series a send. I almost want to compare it to Kurt Angle's TNA send-off where he had the series of matches, and they were all quality against quality opponents. Not his WWE one, which, again, I'm not going to go off on that rant, but his TNA one. They matched him up with the right people, with the right styles, that can give him the best match possible and make it look like time hasn't passed. He looks like Al Bundy on fucking steroids, but he can still come off and kick your ass. And
what did you say about the Jeep wagon he was driving?
I don't want him to listen to this.
He ain't listening to this. You were saying so much shit about it.
Well, dude, he drove up in a white G-Wagon that was obviously like, okay, it needs to, somebody run that through the car wash. Hey, it is what it is. He rolled up in a white G-Wagon that was all dirty, had bird poop all over the damn window and everything. And it's like, okay, somebody take it through the car wash.
When he pulled up, didn't it kind of feel like it was OJ and the Bronco all over again? Like he was in the car. He's like, you know who this is? It was a weird moment. It was very surreal as he pulled up and parked right in front of the event. We saw
he parked in a red zone. That's all. I'm like, I dare somebody to tow his shit.
Dan Severn literally walked here from Coldwater, Michigan, and you got Shamrock driving right to the front door. It just both of them were sweethearts, nice guys. We were just teasing. They were both really cool.
Yeah, for a deadly killer, he has such a genuine smile, Dan Severn. I was like, aw.
I mean, I saw that guy just brutalize people in the octagon, and then to have him, he's like, hey, put your arm around me. I was like, okay, man.
It's like, is this a trick?
It's like, is he going to turn this into a cross-faced chicken wing? Hey, didn't someone put you in a cross-faced chicken wing once?
Yes, Bob Backlund did it.
Backlund did it. Did he scream and foam at the mouth while he did it?
I don't know, because I wasn't expecting it. I just asked him if he's ever been able to get it on somebody as tall as me, because I'm 6'4". And he's like, I'm not sure. And I'm like, okay. And I thought the conversation was over. I got my picture, walked away, and then all of a sudden he grabs me from behind and puts it on me.
Did you get a picture of the after, like of you in the hold, or no?
No, because I wasn't expecting it.
That would have been the best thing, man.
I wasn't expecting. I didn't ask him to put me in it. I just asked if he's ever has, because I don't ever recall him seeing him put Diesel or anybody in it like that. So I was just asking.
I mean,
I was doing a conversation on technique, and instead he freaking scared the living daylights out of me twice.
So what I'm going to tell you right now is you did ask him to put it on, not with saying, Mr. Backlund, please make me tap out, but you said, hey, you ever put it on a dude this big? And he's like, challenge accepted. And when you're crazy and old, man, like, those are fighting words. You're lucky you walked out with your arm intact, man.
I don't know if to this day, Bob Backlund, I don't know if that's real or Memorex, and I don't want to know.
And that's the most we'll ever put over Bob Backlund on this podcast. Weak ass.
I was like,
weak ass running the WWE, taking the belt off of Bret Hart. What the fuck is that?
Wait for him. Yeah, I'm waiting for him and Terry Funk to crack first.
Terry Funk. I heard someone doing an impression of Terry Funk, and it was like, I haven't talked to Terry Funk enough to know if that's really what he sounds like, but it was exactly what Beyond the Mat sounded like. So the more the guy said, Terry, or whoever he said the name. Anyways, I'm getting you derailed again. It's been a long morning.
Yeah, well, we only got 5 minutes till we eat, so what's on your mind? We'll get me on the way back.
My mind is like carne asada and chorizo and albondigas. But as far as wrestling goes, I think that it's just really cool experience. Like, I don't know how many of the listeners on this podcast actually get to go to meet and greets. This is my second meet and greet that I fortunately enough got to do with you, Darryl. The last meet and greet you and I did together was with Raven, and it's always fun because Darryl has competed in the I don't want to get it wrong because I don't want to say MAGA and people think you're making America great again. The grappling is North American
Grappling Association.
It's NAGA, and you got to be careful about that too, because if you say that wrong, you get canceled on Twitter. But
and funny enough, when I competed in my first tournament, I actually bought this T-shirt. They thought, because all they saw was the AGA, and of course the N and the M look very similar, so they're just like, and it's an American flag on the shirt, so they're like, MAGA? I'm like, no. Like, no. And I had to point out, like, no, North American Grappling Association.
But it's cool that when you bring that out, because, like, pro wrestling fans don't necessarily know what that is, or do they even care? But I know you bring it out to show to grapplers, wrestlers who actually grappled. You showed it off to Kurt Angle in the past, and then when Raven saw that belt, he knew exactly what it was, and you guys were talking MMA like almost instantly.
Yeah.
And the same, obviously, with Severn and Shamrock.
Yeah, Severn recognized it right away.
And of course, you bring that belt out. I mean, those two guys, of course, they're going to know what the history of that and what it means. You had a pretty cool conversation with both of them about that.
Yeah, most definitely. It's funny though, because I get more, because you see it, I've had a lot of replica belts, and depending on who's there and what titles they've held, I've always brought my replica belts out. Now I bring them out for my son to hold.
Yeah.
Because me, it's like, no, everybody has the belts that they bought. This is the belt I won. So that has more pride to me than anything. So I bring that everywhere. And the conversations I get for it are amazing. When I took it to Double or Nothing, and just the amount of like grapplers and MMA guys that were at the show, or people like Teddy Hart stopped me in the hallway because he knew what it was.
Yeah.
Was really stands out, and really, like I said, it's definitely a conversation starter. Definitely the crossover has definitely helped me, discover. There's been an influence on me, so to speak, with just, who to watch for in wrestling, with different types of styles I now recognize that I never appreciated before. And definitely makes me look at pro wrestling different, where I'll see something that I can try to use on the mat, and most definitely help me appreciate different talents more, and people that I wish I would have appreciated when they were out here. Guys like, I wish I would have appreciated Ryan Taylor's style a lot more than I did after I started doing it. Guys like, I wish I would have appreciated Timothy Thatcher a hell of a lot more than, because I was just looking at the gimmick and not his actual wrestling style that I should have I wish I would have appreciated more.
Right.
Definitely guys like that. And definitely now with the network and digital media and everything, I definitely look at matches differently now than I did before.
And I'm going to say this on this podcast so that everyone can hear it. The first time you use a Canadian Destroyer during one of your MAGA tournaments, I will send you $20. And hey, if you guys are enjoying this podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are also every Tuesday at 2:05 Pacific, 5:05 Eastern. We do the pre-party with me, Jay Cal, where we talk about all the NWA action that will be coming on Power immediately following the podcast. And then on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, we do a recap show with me, the modern day hero, former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion, Kevin Frazier, along with DKM, and we recap, review, retcon, reconsider why we watch Power every Thursday with you. And we'll be back after this.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Alliance Blog Podcast, a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you won't miss any future episodes? We'd also like to remind you that we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on YouTube at the Alliance Blog. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, and Twitch at the Alliance Blog. Remember, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is essentially your own. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.